So let's shift gears and talk about what Ed introduced as being a really critical aspect of creating these experiences, and that's the organizational construct. Like, how are we organizing for success, and who in organizations is responsible? Is there a sole owner for the customer experience when we think about the total experience? Key skills, right? Innovation within organization that drives these terrific experiences. So, Lori, can you talk about your point of view, having been in some of these companies with phenomenal brands and phenomenal experiences who are currently innovating? Who does this? And who should do this if they're currently not doing it?
So the thing that I would say, by the way, I don't know the right answer on this, but I'll offer one point of view to start the conversation, which is much like it would be crazy if you, back in the old days, if you'd say, well, HR owns all the employee stuff, they own keeping our employees engaged and they own employee retention and all that and employee development. It's like, no, all of us do it. Leaders in the organization, everyone does that. So I think that customer experience has to evolve to be the same way. I think back in the day, we thought about it very narrowly, even as recently as 2015 when I was at Keurig, and we sort of thought about it as, well, the people who manned our 800 number, that was who owned customer experience. But I actually think that it needs to be sort of broadly within the company. And just like any other big initiative, you might have it as an overarching thing. I'm not opposed to having somebody be, just like with ESG, like somebody could be sort of the brand manager, if you will, where they might own kind of overarching, looking at it across the company. But I think something like customer experience, I think it works best when everybody understands that that's a core value of the company. And then you have kind of, marketing, what they were doing, and the chief digital officer, and sales, and logistics, and operations, and store, and e-commerce, however you're organized. I think it's one of those things that everybody has to have, both as part of their ethos and their core work. Otherwise, it just kind of gets like, oh yeah, that's a thing, like the customer experience is part of marketing or wherever it falls, or there's a CXO and that person owns it. It's too easy for other people to do this. So I would be a big fan of a more integrated and fulsome approach that starts from the top of the company and that goes through all the verticals.
And Scott and Megan, would you agree with that? Do you have diverging different points of view?
I'm shocked at how design thinking has not become a much, much, much bigger competency in companies, but it's still kind of, oh, what is design? People ask all the time, what are you talking about? Well, you'd be better off saying, quoting Jeff Bezos, well, that's about the customer, the empty chair, or a 360 approach. But design thinking, maybe we need just better language to describe it. I will tell you from personal experience, it all depends on how the company is organized and how they compensate executives. Because in the hotel world, for instance, the brand consumer-facing responsibility is not, it should be like Bob Iger wants to understand the entire brand. The company is responsible for the brand. The marketing or the communication of the brand can go into certain disciplines. But, in the hotel business, usually architecture and construction report into which, the building of the building and the design of the room flows into development, which are guys that are being compensated on deal flow. So, and their bonus structure. I won't belabor this.
No,
it just all depends.
Right. No, that makes sense. What I'd like to do now is give each one of you 30 seconds to outline one or two takeaways from today's conversation that you would like to leave the audience with. What's the key thing that is important in creating mesmerizing consumer and customer experiences? Megan, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'll make it simple. Focus on the customer experience from a personalized perspective and what technologies can help enable that wow factor for you in the short term.
Great. Scott?
I would say rethink loyalty to your product service offering, and in doing so, put your very best, most diverse people on the biggest opportunity, not the biggest problem.
Awesome. Awesome. And Lori?
Well said. I would say to take all of the thinking that we explored today and not just think about it in terms of your product and service, but also in terms of your own company, your own associates, your own sort of hybrid or flexible return to work, and think about the same set of disciplines that you apply to everything we talked about. Think about that journey and everything else as it applies to your own colleagues and associates, and what this new post-COVID kind of hybrid work is going to look like.
Great. And I have a few, just in the interest of time, again, I have a few audience questions, but I'm only going to be able to ask a couple here. So Lori, this one's for you. From your experience, how do you decide that you're ready for wow factor versus working on fundamentals for a great experience?
I guess just having been trained in, kind of classically in marketing from a brand pyramid and things like that. And I do think you have to get, the Maslow's hierarchy thing. I think you have to sort of get basic needs met before you can sort of get wowed with sort of, sexy things at the top. So I would just say, I think you have to make sure that you are meeting the basic needs in the moments that matter. You understand the customer journey, you understand the wants, the needs, the emotions, the triggers, everything there before you start getting, I'll call it, distracted with sort of with things that are just kind of these wow moments. So just, I would say, get the basics right, and you'll know from your customers. If you're doing listening with like a big L, you'll understand from your customers, are you doing that right? Doesn't have to be purely linear, but it's really easy, especially as someone who grew up in consumer marketing. It's really easy to kind of get wowed by the sexy stuff and then not be able to do a basic order, basic return. If you don't have that right, you're not going to get the credit for the wow.
And this is a question for Megan or Scott. How do you balance the need for hyper-personalization without breaching the privacy and tone issues that some consumers have?
Ask the customer what they want and let them opt in or opt out.
That's simple. That's great. That's great.